Hello everyone. Today we are going to start our new series and that is based on the badge job. Okay. So initially we would start with the lecture explaining each and everything theoretically, and then we will see each and every component in the upcoming video using the SAP environment. So that part we would be covering practically. So let's start with the badge job. So let me mention it, badge job. So generally what comes in our mind when we heard about the batch job? So usually people say batch job is an automatic execution of program. Okay. Let's suppose if we have to define it, how you can define it? So simply you can say it is a scheduled program execution that runs in the background of SAP without requiring any user intervention. Okay, so let me mention it and you can also write down somewhere for your reference. It is a scheduled execution of program that runs in the background without requiring user intervention. User intervention means the one who is using the SAP. Okay, intervention. So what we have to do for like scheduling a batch job, we will have to firstly like define it and then we schedule it and then SAP automatically executed as per the condition setup. Okay. So what is the significance of the batch job? Why do we need it in SAP? Okay. We can directly execute any T code. Okay. So there is a need. Let me write it. Significance, so we can understand what is the significance of the batch job. So here in the definition itself, you can understand what is the batch job, what is the role of the batch job. For example, in day-to-day transaction, you might be requiring the reports. You might be need to do a billing or posting any document or running the like depreciation in the month end. So all are these tasks which we require to complete like in a day-to-day activities or monthly activities or the yearly activities. So all these activities, okay, we do regularly. So some of the things can be automated. Automated means once you define it, SAP will automatically execute or accomplish your requirement. Okay, so that is actually the work of batch job. Okay, so now coming to the significance or the importance of the batch job, we can mention the first point is it actually automate the recurring processes. Recurring, you already know the repetitive processes. For example, like depreciation posting, or it can be GRIR clearing, or it can be like billing, and so on. Okay. Now, what is the other significance we can mention? So let me write it. The importance of this is, for example, it can process like millions of records. So while you are performing like or executing any T code, you can only process like a limited number of records. Otherwise, it will give you runtime errors. Okay, as per the configuration. But in the batch job, since it runs in the background, you can process millions of records. Okay, and apart from that, we can mention it ensure auditability. What do we understand by the auditability? It simply means once you execute any batch job, it provides you the logs or the traceable objects, okay, in the form of like a spool. It will show you what has been executed, who executed it, and what was the result. The timing, the date, and everything you can check. So this is how it ensures the auditability. Now next comes the it reduces the human error. Okay. For example, if you are executing any T code in the foreground, you might be giving the input and there are chances of like the error because you might give the wrong input and it would be resulted into a wrong output. So this is how it reduced the human error by eliminating manual intervention of any of the user. Okay, now we will deep dive into the technicalities of the batch job. If you see here in the definition, I use the word background. Okay, so we will see what is the background, what is the foreground, and we are going to see how actually SAP this batch job works in the background. Okay, so let's start with the structure. Okay, or we can simply say the technicalities. Let me just mention structure of batch job. Under this we will take like singles headings. So first of all we are going to see about the foreground. What do we understand by the foreground and the background? So now what happens is whatever the job you run, these actually run in the background. Okay. But what is the foreground? For example, I told you there might be a two way of the execution. One is you are using any T code and performing the action live. Okay. So in that case, that particular action would be performed foreground. Okay. And this is also known as online. But while you are executing the same using a batch job, it would be known as like executing in the background. Okay, so in the foreground you always need manual user actions. Okay, but in the background it is a scheduled action without any manual intervention. So let me color it. Okay, and apart from that the volume of the data is relatively low, and if we talk about the background, the records, or we can say the data is, for example, we can mention millions of records are there in terms of volume. Or if you want, we can add one here, the tab mentioning what actually we are talking about, like intervention. So, and here we are talking about the volume. And next we can talk about the work process. Okay, so just after this we are going to see the work process. So what is the work process we are going to discuss, and we are going to see what is the role of this work process. So whenever you are executing any T code in the foreground, you will be using a work process as a dialog. In short, we write it DIA. Okay, so let me mention it. So here you are utilizing the work processes dialog, but here you utilize BTC, which is a background. Okay, so remember these are very much important from the technical perspective. And next we are having, for example, the time limit. A time limit is usually or the comparatively short, and here it is like long, extended up to uh, hours also. Okay, it can run up to hours, like 8 hours, 10 hours, or more than that even. So here we can mention the time limit, and we can have some examples also. Okay, so let me mention. Examples can be, for example, like if you have to post any document manually, you can use T code FP50. If you have to create any sales order, VS01. If you have to create any purchase order, you can use T code ME21N. Now here I have already told you, if you have to run like depreciation, FAB, like using the program and the variant, you can schedule a job for this. You also might be needing the automatic payment program jobs, which comes under the T code F110. So these are the some of the examples of the background as well as the foreground operations. Okay, so you have to remember your batch job functions or executes in the background. Okay, so now we will be understanding the work processes. I told you this is the work process. How, what are the work process, and which work process is utilized by the batch job. It is also one of the most significant part for you. So let me mention it. We have, let me mention the work processes. Okay, so usually we are having like 7 types of work process which are commonly used. Okay, so let me just give it in a tabular form. Okay, so let me mention the process. the work process. Just let me write the process and the function. Okay. Uh, Let me write the first work process. So I told you in the foreground, you use the work process as a DIA. Okay, just before writing these categories of the work process or the types of it, let me tell you what work process is. Okay, so generally or in a layman language, you can say the work process are the uh, running programs, or simple way you can say these are the active workers in any of the organization where, for example, the works come up and that is picked by that active worker and then the task is accomplished. Similarly, in SAP, we are having multiple running program. Whenever any request is raised, whether in the form of like online interaction or the execution in the foreground or in the background, these programs, running programs, pick up that request and the process it. Okay, so this is actually a work process or the role of work process. Okay. So let me mention what are the different categories of it or what are the uses of it. Okay. So here we are having DIA. In short, we call it DIA and the full form is, let me mention, dialogue. Okay. Dialogue word process. Now, what is the function of it? We have to remember it. Okay. So whenever you see the dialog box, the functionality of dialog box is to handle the foreground or, let me mention, foreground or online user request. So whenever you are executing any T code in the main like a screen, so it will be considered as execution in the foreground and it will be processed by a work process DIA, which is a dialog work process. Now the second is, which we have already seen just here in the background, which is BTC. BTC is nothing but a background. Okay, so you have to remember this as well. And what is the function of this BTC? So the function of this BTC is to execute the background request or the uh, this batch job request. So let me mention it. Like it handles exclusively the batch jobs request. Okay, it executes the batch job requests. Now next we are having the UPD. So UPD is nothing but a update. Okay, it is a update work process. So what is the role of this? It actually handles database update task. So for example, you executed the T code FB50. So one new screen will open up which would be asking you to give the data. So that screen appearance is managed by dialog box, but once you give all the entries and save it, so that request to update the database or to save that particular document in the database layer, that update work process gets activated and accomplish this requirement. Now next we are having this ENQ, which is nothing but a NQ work process. It is also plays significant role, and the role is related to the, it actually manages log objects. So in SAP, when you work, okay, and you are on particular transaction and another person also comes on a similar like or the same transaction code. So what happens if you are trying to edit any of the field in that particular screen, the other person won't be able to edit it and it will show this particular screen has been logged by or this T code has been logged by this and this person. So it means it actually protect, okay, the duplication of the editing of any of the field, because there might be a scenario like there is a single field and two users are trying to edit it. So this NQ work process actually manages those objects. Okay, it actually logs for one particular person who's currently doing it, so no other person can do any other changes in that particular screen of the T code. Now the next important work process is SPO, which is known as the spool. So what is the role of this work process? It actually controls or manages the print spool request. So you will come to know about the spool, what it is. Okay, so spool is actually a kind of result, okay, of the execution you have done, and it is specifically generated in a batch jobs. Okay, we will see. So those printing or the generation of the spool is managed using a work process SPO. Now next we are having the work processes MSG, which is known as message, okay, message server. So what is the role of this message server is it actually manages logons and communication between instances, or we can mention servers. So what happens is, for example, you are having production client as 100. So in that 100, we are having the multiple servers or the instances to like protect our system being down if there is a like high load of the user on any particular client. So what happens is we divide or we bifurcate that particular client into multiple servers, like for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what happens is, for example, there are 10 people on like first server. So whenever the like other person is trying to log in into the same client, so this message work process automatically log in that next person into a server too. And similarly, following on, if there are like other users, then this message server will if there is a request from any new person, it will land that person or logging that person into a server 3, 4, 5, and so on. Okay, so this is how it manages the communication between the servers. For example, if something is getting updated or the data is getting updated in one of the server, that is communicated to the other server as well to ensure the consistency of the data. And this is done by the message work process. Okay, and there is also one important work process, that is a gateway. So here we have seen in the above, what happens is it manages the logons and the communication between instances in the servers of the client. And here it actually manages communication between SAP and third party application. So in SAP, you often see our SAP system often integrate or communicate with the third party tools. So these tools can be like any particular portal, like including Blackline, okay, or it can be any other third party tool which communicate with our gateway, okay, or which communicate with our SAP. So that communication is managed by the gateway work process. Like all the communication and everything is managed by this particular work process. I hope you would be clear on this part. Now, moving next, in the job, we are having one important thing, which is a job class. So, what do we understand by the job class? So, job class actually determines, let me mention, determines the priority of job and resources they can utilize. Okay. So in SAP, okay, you will find a three classes, okay, of the jobs. So let me mention it. The class and the name we can mention and the priority. Or we can simply mention the function. Okay. And then we have a name. Okay. So the class, what is the class? So I have already mentioned what is the class. Class actually determines the priority of job, okay, and the resources they can utilize, okay. So the first is A, and the second is B, and the third is C. So we are actually having three classes of the batch job. So what do we understand by A? It actually represents the high priority, okay? And it represents the medium, and finally it represents the low priority, or we can simply mention here the priority, not the name. Okay. Now, what is the function of like keeping any job on a high priority or the medium priority or the low priority? So here, for example, you might be having year-end closing jobs. Okay. So in that case, you will have to schedule your job in a high priority. So what will happen is, for example, this BTC will pick up firstly the high priority job if it is engaged in the other functions. So it will actually pick up firstly the high priority job, and then it will give the priority to the medium okay class, and then it will finally give it to low class. Okay. So this is actually used in, for example, critical jobs, okay, which includes, we can mention the year end closing, okay, year and closing. And what kind of jobs comes under this medium category? These are, we can mention, like regular daily jobs, or we can mention the monthly jobs, which includes like depreciation. Or if we talk about the daily jobs, it might be related to the billing, okay, or the credit jobs to remove the inconsistency, and so on. And under the low priority job, these might be related to like reports, or if you need any extracts. Okay. So they are not modifying any data or doing activity, just they are providing you the extracts or the report. These are often comes under the class C. Okay. So you have to remember this. Let me put it under a table form. Okay. Uh, and let me give a coloring to it. Okay. So this is all about your job class. Okay, so next important thing in the batch job is the job status life cycle. Okay, what are the stages your job goes through, and what are the statuses it is having at various stages. So we are going to cover that part, which is very much important for your understanding, because you will often observe your job is in different or the varying statuses. Okay, so we will be mentioning all the status. Let me mention the status and what is the meaning of it. Okay, we will be having only two things. So let me take status as here, and then we will be having meaning. Okay, so your job actually goes through six step. Okay, I will be mentioning all these six statuses. Like it vary. Okay, and but these are the six stages your job might go through. So first is, let me mention the scheduled. Okay, your job might have the status as scheduled. Okay, and I will also mention what can be the meaning of this particular status. And next, it can be released. Next, it can be ready, and next status or stage can be active, and finally, it can be finished or it can be cancelled. Okay, so these are the six stages or the statuses your particular job might go through. Okay, so we need to understand what is the relevance or what is the means of each particular status. You will often see in your project. Okay, so let me mention the meaning. So what happens is, for example, while you are defining your job and you just gave the program it will be executing and the variant it will be taking. Okay, so once you define it, you actually complete the steps. Okay, So once you save it, and then next comes the let me mention it, and then you actually save it after giving the name of the job and everything. You just let me mention job is defined, like you completed the steps, but there is a start conditions also after that, but those start conditions have not been given yet. Okay, let me mention the start conditions are not given. Okay, and the second is, for example, you defined a job, and let me mention here itself, job is defined, steps are completed. Okay, and start conditions are not given. Okay, so next comes the released status. So in this status, the job is defined, the steps are completed, but here let me mention the start conditions are also defined, and it's waiting for start conditions to be met. Okay, so it is waiting for the start condition to be met. Okay, for everything is done, but the condition which you have defined under the start condition, those conditions are awaited. Okay, those conditions are not being met yet. So these conditions might be depending on the timing or the date and so on. Okay, so don't worry, just this is the theoretical explanation for your understanding. We are having, like in this series itself, we would be having the detailed and the stage wise explanation in the SAP Live, so you would get a better understanding. Just for the like before an understanding, we are taking this a theoretical session. So you should remember what is the meaning of schedule status, what is the meaning of release status. Now let's suppose your, for example, job is defined, steps are also completed, start conditions are also defined, and the conditions are also met, and it's awaiting free BTC. Okay, so I told you there might be a some BTC, which is a like background work process, might be busy, but your job is actually waiting for free BTC. So once the BTC is free, will pick up your job. So mostly in low priority jobs or the low class job, like for example, if the job class is C, most of the time they wait for the BTC work process to be freed and it will pick up, because BTC always give the high priority and immediately pick the job which is created in a class A. Okay, so here we can see under the ready, the conditions are met and it is just awaiting for a free BTC work. Okay, now next comes the active state, which is quite often visible while your job is actually running. Job is running. Okay, and in the long hours job you will see this active status for a very long period of time. For example, there is a large data sets to be processed by the job, so it will show you the active state. And next, if your job is successful, job is successful, so it will show as finished. And if your job is failed, it will show as cancelled. Now the job, how job would be cancelled, job would be cancelled if your variant was incorrect, or if there was a like something wrong in the program, or if it ran for a longer period of time and gave you runtime error. So there might be multiple reasons for the job failure, but in case if your job is failed, the status will be cancelled. Okay, so which these are the statuses your job actually goes through. Okay, so let me mention, let me give the border itself. Okay, so just for your like good visibility, I have gave it in a tablet form. Okay, so just remember, these are the six stages or these statuses your job actually goes through. Okay, now next important thing which we are going to discuss about the batch job is like what are the important transaction code And what are the transaction code and tables? Okay. So we actually use, there are two important T codes for a functional consultant. Otherwise, there are multiple T codes which are used by the basis, because job monitoring or like job configuration, mostly the background part or the technical part is done by the SAP basis team. Okay. But if you have to create from the functional side, we are having two important T code. One is for the creation and the another is for monitoring. Okay, so the one is SM36, which is used to define background job, and SM37 is for monitoring the job. Okay, and then further we are having the table. I told you we are also having the table for this. The table is TBTCO. Let me mention it. It is a table. Okay. So table is TBTCO and the another table TBTCP. There are other table also. Just you have to replace this O with I or the other alphabet. So these are for the different purposes, but these two tables are of significance and you can remember it to make your work easier or comfortable. Okay, so the one is, it will give you the detail about the job headers. Okay, it will tell about the what is the job name. Okay, and the date and timing and everything. And the another is, it will tell you about the steps. Okay, so steps, what comes under the steps are program and the variant in any particular job. So all these details will be provided under this particular table. Okay, and next we will be seeing about the uh, like the job steps. Okay, so while you are defining the particular job, okay, there are some stages. First of all, you like define the steps and then the start conditions, and then finally you save it and the job gets started. Okay, okay, just before that, let me mention two important thing here. Okay, so the job actually functions or execute on two things. Okay, the one is program and the another is, let me mention, variant. Okay, so on these two important parameters, your batch job is actually defined and runs. Okay. So first of all, we should know what do we mean by the program. Okay. So if you are like beginner, so there is a coding in languages. Okay. So in SAP, it actually use a ABAP language. Whatever the code you write any particular language, that code is known as the program. Okay. That set of a code or the logic or the, for example, or the instruction is actually make your program. So whatever the code is written, okay, or the package of code is known as the program. But in this simple language, we can mention it is a set of instruction. Okay, in the form of ABAP code. I told you that the coding of this in SAP, it is done in the ABAP language, okay, which is a like language built by the SAP itself. So what kind of instruction is this? It actually that SAP executes to accomplish accomplish a specific task. Okay, so you have to like run a job to do the GRIR postings. So that is a particular task. For that task, you would be having a set of code, and that code is known as the program, and it is a kind of instruction to the system itself that you have to do this particular part. Okay, and so in our upcoming videos, the program we are going to be like majorly utilized in our sessions is RFBLA00. So let me just tell you one more thing. Program can be like standard. Standard means it can be provided by the SAP itself, which would be visible in the system. Okay, and it can also be a customized. Customized means you can create your own program as per your the requirement. Okay, so there might be a like new requirement if you are in the implementation project. There is a requirement that, for example, if someone execute FHELB03 report, okay, so the balances whatever we are like getting should be stored to any particular path from where any third party tool can pick up that particular data. So in that scenario, you will have to create one custom T code, which is your own T code. And who will do it? We are having a technical team known as the ABAP team. Okay. So the coding team. So that team would actually make that program. You will have to first from the functional side, we will have to mention what is required, from which tables it would be taken, and how the report would look like, and what would be the logic, what would be the path. Everything you will be giving, and that document would be prepared, which is known as the functional specification. And then you provide it to the technical team, which is the ABAP, and that team would prepare your custom program. Okay. So this is how it actually works. But in our upcoming live practical videos related to the batch job, we are going to use this particular standard program, which is RFBLA 00. And this program is actually used to like see the financial statement report. Okay, as per the configuration it depends, and it also gives you the like trial balance report. And for example, whatever the program we have in standard, so we would be having the T code also. In custom you might not be having, but for standard programs often we are having the T code. So for this particular screen we are having the T code F.01. Okay, so if you execute this T code, okay, you will get this particular screen. And if you execute this program, you will end up on the same screen. Okay. Now, what is the variant? The another important parameter of the any of like any job. So variant is nothing but a actually a saved set of values. Okay, for a program selection screen. So let me mention it. It is a saved set of input, or we can say the values in program selection screen. So let's suppose if I just executed this program RFB LA00. So let me also clarify one thing. If you have to execute any program, we use the T code SE38 or SA38. Okay, but the T code you can directly give just F.01. But to execute any program, we have to give a T code SE38 or SA38. So let's suppose you gave the program in SE38 and execute it. It will give you that screen of financial statement report. Here you give your input. Okay, so you actually give particular input and you save that input and name that particular set of input. So that naming is itself known as the variant. So that is why it is known as the saved set of input in program selection screen. So you can directly use those input while you are executing the T code, giving the program as well as the variant. Okay. So if you have to like create the variant, same screen you can use like at SE38, which is also used to create a program. Here you can create it. Otherwise, you can simply create it using a T code. Let's suppose you give the T code this F.01, and then you can like after giving the values, like you are not executing the T code, you clicked on save, it will give you option of naming it. Once you name it, it will create it as a variant with the attributes once you define each and everything. Okay, we will also see this part in our practical videos of the batch job. Okay, so we were about to discuss the job steps after that. Okay, so job steps. So what are the job steps? Okay, so what are the major job steps? So here just I will briefly mention those steps, and in detail we would be discussing in our practical videos. Okay, so in steps, simply what we do is we actually give the ABAP program and the variant. Okay, so there are actually under the steps, you will see the three options. The one is ABAP program, which is commonly used by the functional consultant. And then we also having the external command and further the external program. Okay. So these two things are used by your basis consultant. For example, let me just brief you. These program or the command are used when you are like dealing, your system is dealing with the third party tool, third party interface. But this is a web program directly if you are executing your job in the SAP itself, and it has nothing to do with the any external system. So it will execute whatever the values you give here in the form of program as well as the variant. The next important part of the job is start conditions. Okay, start conditions. So under the start conditions, you actually define the timing, okay, the date, the dependency and everything. Just let me give it a color. Okay. So let me mention what are the conditions. Okay. So I have already told you, it will tell you about the frequency, start timing, date, and everything. So here, what are the options available? So the one is immediate. Okay. So as I have told you, we are going to see in detail each and everything. Just let me brief you on this. The immediate means you want your job to be executed now. Okay. And next, it will give you option of date and time. You can give particular date and particular time the job should start. So for example, if you have to schedule your job for tomorrow, you can schedule it now. Okay. And just giving the date and timing. And after that, just giving the date timing. After that, we are having the after job. Okay. So this option is used to create a dependency. So there is a predecessor job. You want that job to be finished first before starting the current job. In that case, you can utilize this option. And there is a after event. So there are certain event after which you want your job to be executed. You can define that. And we are having operation mode. For example, there is a operation mode change, like change to a day, change to a night at certain system timing. Okay, system mode gets changed. So on those changing of the modes, you can define your job. Okay, so whatever you define it under the start conditions, it will function. And next, we are having the option of calendar based. So you might be having calendar in your system, like as per the like various countries, like you can have the working days, the holidays, so you can define your job as per the calendars of any like specific country. Now we are having the job log and job spool, which are nothing but the output. Okay, we can simply say the output of your batch of execution. Okay, so let me just mention the job log and the job spool. So just let me give you the pointers. So what is the job log? So job log, if we like differentiate between job log and the job spool, I already told you these are the output. Job log actually tells you about the like system or the or it will tells you about the job performance. Like it will tell you about the start timing of the job, end timing of the job, any errors are there, any exception are there. It will tell you the messages whether it is successful uh, or it is aborted or there is error. Okay, so all these things will be provided by the job log. And the spool actually tells you about the it will give you the output. Okay, for example, you executed the batch job, for example, for T code F.01, of which we mention the program here. So it will give you a spool, the list of that particular, for example, financial statement. So that list is a part of job spool. Okay, so just let me briefly mention. It will tell you about the system level messages. Okay, uh, system level messages. Okay, and these can be like start time, or the it can be end time of the job, it can be errors, or you will having the message sign. Okay, that we will see in our practical session. And you are having any exceptions. Okay, and in the spool you will be having a program program output, and these can be in the form of any lists, or it can be in the form of reports, or simply we can say like any other business data. Okay, so I hope it is clear. You can check the job log using that particular T code SM37, and job spool you can check using a same T code, and also you can check using another T codes like SP01 and SP02. So here you can add those T code like SP01 and SP02 to check the spool. Okay, so just for your information, I have mentioned. Now hope the difference between the job log and the job spool would be clear to you now. Okay, and let me just mention one more thing, so everything is cleared while you see this in like system practically. So how usually that particular, for example, that job log would look like. Okay, so you will be having the messages like job started. Okay, and then it will show you like BTC work process job. Okay, so what it will show, it will just show you the job started. So it means your background work process picked up your job, and it will be followed by the timing. Okay, and then further you will see that step, it will show you step 001 started. Okay, and under bracket it will tell you about the program. It will name that program, and then followed by the variant, and it will name your variant. So what does it mean? I'm mentioning. Okay, so it means your ABAP step just commenced. Okay, means whatever the program and the variant you gave, the execution just started. Okay, here your job got picked by the work process, and then you would be having the statuses like your job got finished, or your job got like cancelled. Okay, so these are the job logs you get. So under the cancel, it will show like the runtime or any other thing. Okay, so uh, this is how your job log would look like in your SAP system. I hope it is clear to you up to this point. Okay, so now let moving further, we will discuss some key points and the best practices. Okay, so first of all, let us discuss the key pointers. Okay, let me mention the key points. So what are the key points? You will see a word job chain. Okay, so it simply means, for example, if there are like two three jobs and you want like one job to be dependent on the other. Okay, so in that what you do, you like create or schedule a job in sequence. Okay, so you can mention sequence of batch jobs. So if someone is mentioning about job chain, you should understand there is a sequence of batch job. For example, the first job will run, the second will run, and the third will run, depending on the status of the first job and the second job for the third one. Okay, so if your first job gets failed, the second job would not run. Okay, so the running or the execution of the second or the dependent job depends on the predecessor's job. Okay, and this is accomplished in SAP using, I told you we are having the start condition. Here we are having the option job after. Okay, or let me show you where I mention it. Uh, it is a after job. Okay, let me mention after job. Okay, so it will once you click it, it will give you option to give the predecessor job. Okay, so the next key point is, for example, there is a need to send a alert on the job cancellation. Okay, so like alert on job success and failure or the cancellation is handled by basis. Okay, basis technical team, and it is often using done T code RZ20. And next point is like bad job can be controlled using third party scheduler also. Okay, like atomic. Okay, so your batch job in the system can be controlled by the third party tool also, where they can execute your job or they can create any job. So this is how it can also be done. So don't be confused that we will always be creating job in the SAP Excel. So that is not the case. So third party tools are often used in the large organization. Okay, and there is another important thing: program to delete old job entries. Okay, so in any organization there would be like hundreds or even thousands of job would be running. Okay, and they would be generating a logs. So varying or depending on the organization, there is a retention policy. Some organization wants the data to be retained for at least 15 days or the last 15 days jobs log, or there are the requirements in the organization that there should be a job log data up to the last 30 days. Okay, so that actually is controlled using a program which is RSBTCDEL. Okay, this program is scheduled by the basis team, and you have to give the like number of days you have to retain your data, and whatever the entries are falling outside that threshold, 15 days or the 30 days or the 45 days, whatever it may be as per the business requirement. Okay, all these entries, okay, or the log or the jobs, okay, visible uh, in the SM37 while you monitoring the job would be automatically be removed or deleted from the system. Okay, so this is also one of the important technical point you can remember it. Okay, so these are the some key pointers. Okay, and finally we would be discussing about the best practices. Okay, so what should be our action, okay, while we are scheduling, running or moving, okay, any job. So there are some best practices. Okay, so let me mention best practices. So these are very much important from the functional point of view. Okay, so what are these? Let me just reduce the. Okay, so what are the best practices we should always like keep in our mind whenever we are creating or moving our job? Okay, so it is recommended to always create a variant before you schedule your job. Okay, so what happens is if your program is there but your variant is not needed, if your variant is not created, you might end up scheduling a job and will like it will delay the overall process. So it is often advised, it is a best practice to create a variant before scheduling any job. Okay. And then we are having the best practices: test all jobs in development and the quality assurance system or the test system. Okay, before moving it into the your live or the production system, before moving to PRD, which is a production system. Okay, so it is also comes under your best practices. And always document, okay, all PRD jobs. So whatever the jobs you are creating or moving in production, keep a documentation, so it will help you in the troubleshooting or understanding when the business raises any concern. Okay. And next, you will have to like keep periodic job jobs at class B. Okay. So what happens is often people say, why can't we schedule our job with the class A? So like, if you, for example, give a class A to a multiple job, then your BTC, that background work process, will actually internally competing to pick up the job, which would hamper your system performance. Okay. And another thing is we are having some heavy jobs. Okay. So which actually runs for long hours are like inconsistency removal job or the payroll processing job. So always schedule your like heavy jobs in off peak hours. Okay. Off peak hours. Okay. And usually these are the, let me mention, these are at the night time. Okay. Or the weekend where there is no user activity. Okay. So you have to remember this point, which is also one of the important best practice. Okay. And another thing is always maintain, like I mentioned, maintain a time gap, okay, between habits. Okay, let's suppose you schedule any particular job in the night at 11. There is another heavy job which has to be done in the night. So don't schedule job at the same time. For example, 11. You can just give a like maintain a difference, okay, of the timing. For example, you can schedule next job at 1. If there is another job, you can schedule next job at 2 a.m. in the night. Okay. So this is how you can maintain. And it is known as the staggering of the job. Okay. You maintain a time gap between those heavy jobs. Okay. And it is always advised that whenever you execute your job, always go to SM37 to monitor it. Okay. Monitor your execution. For example, your job might be stuck unnecessarily in the active state. Okay. So you have to identify what actually is hampering that job to be completed. Okay. So it is always recommended that you, once your execution is done, you should monitor it. For example, your job got finished or it is cancelled, or if it is active for a normal period of time or the extended period. So this will help you, your system, to remove any of the issues existing there. Okay, so that's all the basic explanation or the understanding of the page job for you. Okay, and each of these things, okay, whatever we have discussed in our theoretical session, we are going to see each and everything, okay, in short videos, okay, in practical in system. Whether these are steps, conditions, stages, everything we are going to see in this particular series, okay, or in this particular playlist. So be with us and become an expert in the SAP badge job. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you.